of the reality war. Yeah, my first thoughts now that I'm on my own thinking about it. But it does some things, and it does some real things that I don't know how to feel about. Oh, it's okay. We're fine. We're actually fine. I was worried about where that was going for a second there. After watching The Reality War Season 2's finale in cinema, I kind of enjoyed the episode. I was mostly on board, with caveats, of course, and I think on an objective level, it wasn't good. I enjoyed it. I had confidently enjoyed it more than Empire of Death, and then Ncuti starts to regenerate, and the screen fades into Billie Piper. This is not going to be a proper review of the finale or of the season, more of a conversation of what this episode seems to mean. There were rumours a few months ago about Doctor Who doing last-minute reshoots, like this year, I believe, which is insane, considering how close that is to the release of Season 2. You've got that, you've got the lack of a green light for a Season 3. It was appearing that Ncuti had been forced out of the TARDIS. Something had very clearly gone wrong behind the scenes with this whole plan. I'm afraid Mr. RTD may have lost the source. Russell, I think Eccleston might have had a point.
Sack Russell T Davies.
I don't want to say he's washed because he's done some incredible things since that initial era, and so if I had to try and figure out his issue in this era, is that it's too big. You know, that original 4-series run was pretty big in scale, but after that none of his shows were near that kind of massive scale. They were much more personal, I believe, and from a lot of people say, they were pretty great, and I think that's what we were all hoping to see, his developed nature as a writer, looking at these characters in Doctor Who, but that's not what we've got. This era boils down to feeling like him thinking of high content creative moments and then building everything around those moments to initiate conversation. This could be the total tanking of my favourite little show. This era has been a failure on a production level from the moment RTD came back, because that in itself acknowledges failure in the Chibnall era. We have now found ourselves in an actual time loop. I want to be positive, I really do. I went to the cinema to see this finale with my friends, and I immediately had a much more positive outlook than her. Because, I mean, I love Billie Piper, I love Rose, and she's great as Rose, she's great as the Moment, and could be a great Doctor. But I also think this is genuinely maybe the worst option you could have found to cast as the Doctor at this exact moment in time. And that's for various reasons that I will, of course, get into. The decision itself feels like creative bankruptcy. Feels like a potentially even wilder choice than casting RDJ as Doctor Doom. We also went through this 3 years ago with David Tennant. That feels fresh compared to this idea. It feels desperate, it feels dire, and not just with the show, but with culture in general. The fact that Doctor Who, and I don't know if it's a result of it becoming more corporate through Disney or what, but the fact that even Doctor Who is becoming this key jangling nostalgia bait is kind of heartbreaking, truthfully. After this era claimed to be the perfect jumping on point for new fans, it has been anything but that. I don't know if we can blame this era on Disney, or Bad Wolf, or RTD, or the BBC. I don't know whose fault it is, or if it's a collective. I don't know. I think we all need, when the show comes back in whatever form, that it's different in a lot of ways. We've gone from RTD returning, to 13 regenerating into Tennant, to Tennant going off and getting to live a happy life as the Doctor, while Ncuti carries on as 15, so his introduction is massively overshadowed, and then when 15 does finish, after 18 episodes, and 3 Doctor Light stories, he turns into Billie Piper. Even if this isn't the Doctor, and I think a lot of that is copium, but I'll back it because I'm full of it these days. But even if it isn't, even if there is a loophole that means 15 actually didn't regenerate into Rose Tyler or whatever, it's still done that. It's still guilty of committing the act because it draws more attention to the past. Either way. And if you're not going to do any meaningful commentary about that, which it hasn't, 14 was the perfect opportunity for that, and it did everything it shouldn't have done. I like the 60th specials, but bringing back Tennant barely worked. It barely did, and I have zero faith. I'm sorry, but my trust is gone. My trust, Davis, you've lost my trust. I think get Eccleston to run the show. I think he'd do a brilliant job. But it brings so much more attention to Tennant again because 14 is still out there based on RTD's own fucking writing. So is the Doctor like gonna go out to find 14 to fuck herself now? I don't know. Maybe the worst part about this era is how it's kind of failed Ncuti Gatwa. A truly incredible actor, an incredible get for this show, but when he had his segment cut out of Graham Norton where he stated that they'd be filming season 3 before it had even been greenlit, that was very clear that things were not going right. There was some real turmoil behind the scenes. It's become more transparent as we've gone through this era that this has not been the plan. You look at the midnight releases and the 8 AM releases, the absolute devotion to tying everything back to something that's come before, something we've already seen. We've had more sequels to more older stories with more returning characters. Before RTD brought back loads of old characters and stuff like Sarah Jane and the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Master, the difference was that they were re-established. He hasn't done that with any of the big reveals or villains of this era. Sutekh is built on aura and name alone, and the exact same thing goes for the Rani and Omega. They aren't built up. Mrs. Flood being the Rani doesn't really work because she was just a random, seemingly sinister character that could break the fourth wall for still no apparent reason, with no indication that she could be the Rani. So the fanbase theorizes the most simple and cheap answer, and that is the answer.
Well, we'd all like a lot of things that aren't going to happen.
Omega and Sutekh never really had any presence, and just as the Rani was gaining presence, she's eaten, which kind of dissolved the plot. I need to mention the character assassination of Belinda Chandra. She had taken more of a backseat in the recent episodes, in the latter half of season 2. And I've been having a lot of conversations with the people around me that are watching the show about how much of a great companion she is and how much we hope that she's not ruined in this finale. And I was pretty confident that she wouldn't be. I was wrong. This is a legitimate character assassination. This is not the character that we started off with. All the rumours that Ruby was supposed to stay on and be the main companion seem much more plausible because she seems much more important to this season, to this story. The fact that they actually put Belinda in a box to look after a child, to remove her from the episode, like, that's infuriating. That is, I have no words for that. And what makes that even worse is her reasoning for doing that. Because all my homies hate Poppy, the space baby. I mean, I think this would have genuinely worked better if we hadn't had Space Babies, which is still the worst episode of this era, by the way. If Wishworld had focused on Belinda in the Wishworld and her fighting between her true memories with the Wishworld memories, where she's a mother, it could have been something interesting there, but we don't. So it sucks. I actively hate the inclusion of Poppy, and I think how the characters of 15 and Belinda have been dealt with provide a summary of this era's ultimately awful production. Conrad here is a cartoon villain, and the use of the Rani, Omega, and especially the Billie Piper casting feels like a fan fiction. I wanted to see 14 come back just to wrap up the bi-generation, because I don't like that as an idea. And that is seemingly wrapped up now, and I like that it's a last minute Time Lord survival thing, but now, if they do loop back to 14 with Billie Piper, it could be a generational cancellation attempt. I don't think you can watch the finale and call it anything more than a mess or a disaster scenario. However, I do have positives. My immediate feelings are still pretty confident in my opinion that I think this season is quite a bit better than season 1. I think a huge reason is the consequence, in particular with the Doctor. I get that Ruby left last year, but it felt like there wasn't enough of a gap between that and her returning, and how important she was to this story kind of loses any potential weight that had, as opposed to the ending here where the Doctor has to give his life for a child. How we got there is dumb, for sure. There is at least an effective emotional core there for how Poppy was erased from existence in gut-wrenching fashion, by the way. I love as they're folding up the coat. That's truly beautiful. But I just don't really care. I don't have the attachment to her to care about her disappearing. She was a fictional child for Belinda and the Doctor. I don't buy it. I don't care about it. But what I do like is the fact that the Doctor has to give up a potential child of his own and his friend. I don't like that Belinda chooses herself to stay home and that her whole timeline gets rewritten. There is an element of tragedy to it, but I think they make Belinda come off as too happy to have this life. The fact that Poppy wasn't real and kind of became real and Belinda's timeline was rewritten, I like the fact that it negatively affects the Doctor and that he has to kind of leave that behind. But I don't like that it does basically destroy Belinda as a character. This episode has so much going on. There are so many characters that contribute nothing. Rose shows up. No, not that one. No, not that one either. And does nothing. She actually fades in out of nowhere. And I can't remember a line that she has. I liked the action-packed nature of the episode, even if it wasn't always stellar. I mean, I think it was fun. It was entertaining. It's more of a case of what this episode represents is where my faults come in. And also, we're still setting things up when we don't even know if we're coming back. Shut up about the boss. I don't give a shit anymore. I don't care. You've brought this up like 3 times and said to put a pin in it, and we still don't know. I don't care. We need to scrap mystery boxes on the whole, get them away from RTD especially. Jodie comes back as 13 in a pretty good scene, probably the highlight of the episode for me. It's a cameo, but she's a nice inclusion. I think it's effective and hammers the consequence of having the life of the Doctor. Like, it's not really necessary, but I like it. The ultimate failure of the episode though is that creative decision that leaves the show in an even more uncertain place than it felt like it was a week ago. The wall between the land and the sea looks pretty good. The design of that primary sea devil is kind of ass, but so that's going to be a bit of a problem, but I'm keen for that. It looks kind of interesting in tone, considering that's probably the last thing we're going to get from the Whoniverse in a hot minute. I guess it's something to look forward to. So to end this little video, I want to discuss the regeneration itself. I think besides Billie's awfully masked head on top of Ncuti's body, it looked pretty great. I loved Ncuti's delivery of his final lines, and again, it's a case of giving his life to save one other. Despite the universe being saved, the fact that this little shift, this little change, he still has to die to amend that, to amend the other life that has been lost. And I like that. I think that's perfectly Doctor-y. But I never felt any arc for 15. I really like him. I do like this incarnation a lot. But this era has now contradicted itself and its own world building so many times that I just now feel exhausted. The ending of this incarnation and era felt totally out of left field, and everyone involved deserved better. I remember the day RTD was announced to come back. I was so happy. But now we're left in a place where the 15th Doctor has been overshadowed by an unwillingness to let go of the past. And that's how you kill the show. I don't know when Billie was cast. I doubt they have a real reason, and that it was another decision just to cause a reaction and make conversation and make content. And that's the worst thing you can do. It's now reaching parody territory, and I know other people have said that about this era, and I don't agree with that, despite my faults with the era. But this is parody. Inevitably, when it does return, which is at least the bright side of this, at least we will get more Doctor Who. I need it to be a new era. If RTD does stick around, I hope it's just to bridge whatever this casting was for, and then we can get back to new blood and going forward. As much as I dislike the Chibnall era, even when it did indulge in its lore and the past, it tried to make it relevant to the story and new ideas. But this hasn't done that. Wild episode. Wild showrunner. Wild creative decisions. Goodbye to Ncuti's 15th Doctor. Doesn't get a goodbye with Ruby. This episode ended like 5 separate times, and none of them were that satisfying. With any luck, when they come back, they'll be better at making the show. You'd like to hope so. I had fun this era. There are some truly great episodes. I think Season 2 has been pretty consistently great, and Season 1 had some real highlights, but it's made insanely fatal errors. It's been awfully organised. Going forward, I'm going to do my best to be looking ahead positively. I always try to, because I want to support everyone on the show. I struggle to believe that RTD would intentionally be trying to kill the show, so maybe a planned hiatus is the only option left. It's not ideal, and I don't want it, but RTD seems dedicated to making that the only option alongside a full-blown cancellation, which is maybe the only place we can go worse from here. But I hope you enjoyed the reality war. I focused on a lot of negative aspects here because I feel like it needs to be talked about, and I know everyone else will be. But I did enjoy the episode, and I did prefer it to Empire of Death. So, my god. What a disaster.